invite our wonderful Sandra Coney, iconic Piha resident. And Sandra, you're here as that Piha resident. Warm welcome to you both. Hi, Peter.
Tough time in Piha lately, Madam Chair.
Yeah, but just before Sandra gets started, you will be aware there has been an arrest made in the fires, and in discussion with Sandra, we're really clear just to make sure that we don't traverse any legal issues. We can't discuss that, so we can acknowledge, we can pass on our warmest respect and aroha to Piha, but Sandra's here to talk about the land.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and greetings to councillors and members of the Independent Māori Statutory Board. I'd just like to introduce my partner, Peter Hosking. So yes, we are here as residents of Piha. We've come to talk to you today about Agenda Item 16 report, which asks the committee to incorporate the Taitomo block at Piha, which was known also as the Buyers Land, which was purchased by the council in 2014. And the proposal is that it be incorporated into the Waitakere Ranges Regional Park, which we support. But that's not exactly why I'm here. I'm here as a neighbour of that parkland to talk about what Auckland Council must do to prevent any more fires on this land. On Sunday, 8th of May, we had another fire on this land, and this photo is taken from Piha Beach, and it shows my land in the regional park going up in flames. As you will see from attachment B in item 16, when the regional parks consulted the local community about a concept plan for that Taitomo block last year, many people, including myself, raised the need to give greater weight to ecological restoration and to address the fire risk. We opposed recreational tracks cut through the gorse and urged council to give priority to restoring this area, part of which is heavily infested with gorse and other invasive weed species. So just to orient you with that map, the outlined red part is my land of two long boundaries with regional park. On the west, facing the beach, is the Tasman Lookout Track land, which the council has owned for very many decades. The cross-hatched area is the Buyers Block, and that doesn't show the whole of the Buyers Block, but I've got a long southern boundary with that. So this is all at the southern end of Piha Beach. So last week's fire was the third fire to start in regional parks and spread on my property. This photo is of the fire in 1994. At that time, the same person said a second fire in 1998. So this was the outcome there. That track is the Tasman Lookout Track, and this is only a small part of what happened. It was a much larger area than the current fire, though last week's fire went through that same area. The fire last Sunday involved 100 fire crew, many of them volunteers, and 2 helicopters. Crews came from as far away as Silverdale. The fire took 12 hours to put out. And this is a typical scene of my property at the weekend. And since 1994, Peter and I have been revegetating our properties after those other fires, including some parts of regional park adjoining my land, so it's heartbreaking to see the damage. The problem I want to bring to your attention is the need for council to revegetate the parkland to reduce the fire risk, to restore the environment and provide a much more attractive landscape for visitors. So that's partly my land, partly regional park we're looking at there, looking at Taitomo Island. All that has grown back after the other fires is a monoculture of gorse. So this photo was actually taken in 2007. While there are theories that gorse acts as a nursery crop and that natives will grow through it, in this harsh location where nothing grows very tall, the gorse has won a long time ago. The only plant this gorse is being a nursery crop for is climbing asparagus, which is considered one of the most environmentally damaging of pest plants. This climbing asparagus infested gorse on parkland is acting as a seed source for the rest of Piha. And yes, I've been in touch many times with Parks and Biosecurity about dealing with it, but now no one is quite sure how to deal with it, and I'm told there isn't any budget. So this is the picture after the fire of the same area, this similar view. Fire loves the gorse, and so it just went through that really quickly. You can see a fence post there in the middle, and that's my boundary. So this is looking northward in 2007 above the Tasman Lookout track before the fire, showing nothing but gorse. Same photo after the fire, showing how the fire's gone through the gorse. Now this is a photograph that I took just on Christmas, which shows that there is nothing there but a gorse monoculture. This is partly Tasman Lookout track, partly Byers Block, and that is 20-year-old gorse. And I made Peter stand up in it so you can see that's what 20-year-old gorse does when you have the Tasman Sea and the prevailing wind coming in. It doesn't grow very tall. That's the brown part at the back is where the fire's gone. As I said, since 1994, Peter and I have been controlling the gorse in my property and used various methods to reforest it, including growing plants from seeds eco-sourced from the property. We've got very healthy regeneration, so that's looking at my property, from my property, and that brown bit is where the fires got into it. And you can see it's very healthy regeneration in contrast to what's happening on most of the regional park. But obviously it's taken us a lot of work. It's taken us 22 years. And that's the fire going up through my property. It's a strip about 20 or 30 metres wide, went up. Interestingly, I think it went a little bit slower than through the gorse because the bush was taller and it had more things to kind of contend with as it went. It kind of meandered up. I'm not a fire expert, I don't know, and I think they are bringing somebody in to look at it, but I'd be interested to know whether the actual replanting slowed the fire down. Just to note that we started regenerating after the other fires when we were in our 40s, and we're now both in our 70s. So we're both a little daunted at the task ahead. So what we'd ask here today is to ask Council to do two things. Firstly, control the gorse and other weeds on the council parkland and develop a plan for restoring the area. We're very keen to work with the council on that, so it's something we can do as neighbours. The council can't just keep on going with this hands-off approach, but must more proactively return the area to healthy bush. And there's an opportunity we see here to trial various methods of reforesting on a very difficult site. If nothing is done to that burned area, it's just going to revert to gorse. Gorse seed lives in the soil for up to 100 years before it gets going by the fire. The second thing we'd like to see is the council install a couple of water tanks to hold water for the firefighters. There's no reticulated water here, and much of the area is a long distance from the road. In attachment C, this is recommended by the council officers, and it was recommended in a wildfire assessment that was done for the Byers Block a couple of years ago. I understand that during the fire, some of the firefighters at the gap ran out of water for about an hour. I also appreciate that helicopters cannot be brought in the dark. Hoses have to be taken hundreds of metres up very steep terrain on cliff tops. They told me it took an hour to get the hoses up to my place. These fires started around 1 a.m, so it is somewhat of a miracle that there was no wind blowing to take the fires out of control. As it was, it took 12 hours. 2 large water tanks wouldn't cost much and would enable water to be immediately accessible. As I said, that's already been recommended some time ago by expert assessors brought in by the council to advise on the fire risk. So we're here to ask for implementation of a plan to restore the burned and gorse-covered areas, and we'd like to see some precautionary water tanks installed immediately. And this is just final photo to show you how close the fire got to some of the most beautiful scenery in Auckland, which is also the proposed route of the new route of a new part of the Hillary Trail, and one of the reasons the land was bought. Just shows what stands to be lost if fire gets away in this location. So thank you, Madam Chair. We're both happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll let actually Councillor Cooper, and I think it is self-explanatory, and we will pick this up, not necessarily within the item, but we will follow these up and certainly make some progress. Councillor Cooper.
First, I want to acknowledge you, Sandra and Peter, for the decades, and your family before you, for looking after this gem. And, you know, my condolences to you, because it must be absolutely heartbreaking to see all your work just go up in flames like that, or a significant part of it. The question I had was, we know that you were Chair of Regional Parks in the ARC, and I just want to know whether you think that we're spending less money on our regional parks and pest management than before amalgamation, since amalgamation.
I think that's true. It's a question I've raised with officers from time to time. Not only, I think, have the budgets been lowered, but also some of the income that used to come into regional parks now goes into the rest of the council's budget, and I'm talking about the income from things like farming, camping, licences for things like cell phone towers on regional parks, the batches. That money is no longer coming in. But certainly I think the biosecurity budget is, because the two work very closely together, and I understand that there's not a lot of money, and maybe Mr Kimpton could help with this, but when a new piece of land is bought, like that Byers block, which is something like 200 acres, and had been neglected over quite a long period of time, I'm not sure that very much budget follows it in terms of getting it into good health.
And so just on that, I just want to say at the GAP consultation last year, that was brought up to me as well. A lot of the locals said you've got to make sure you make this safe and create access for firefighters. That was one of the common themes that came through, and I think once this has gone into regional parks, then that hopefully will happen. Thank you.
Okay, so there's three things we can pick up there. We'll go, I've got, Councillor Lee and Councillor Walker. Councillors, I will have you both speaking, but I'd like you to keep it very brief. We will pick these issues up and we will come back to the committee on these issues. We have a huge agenda, and we also have quite a lot of apologies for early departure. So let's just stay focused. Councillor Walker.
Sure. I'd make the assumption that if you're looking at hydro seeding, that there's some immediacy around this because of the time of year. You really want to get the seed on the ground right now, correct?
Yep.
So I've just got a question around our ability to respond quickly. I just invite some comment.
Yeah, Councillor, that's one of the points. I don't want to put staff on the spot right now with an immediate answer that may be, either overly enthusiastic or underwhelmingly unsupportive. I think it needs some serious consideration with urgency that we actually deal with the three requests that have come to us, and I'd like us to deal with it in a slightly more planned and orderly way. But the urgency is absolutely understood. We're right at the time when we need to deal with this now. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Sandra and Peter. I know you've been planting and working on that land for many years now. In terms of the impact of the fire, in your view, is the gorse significantly more flammable than the broadleaf native plants you've been planting?
It absolutely looks like that, and I'd be interested. I imagine that regional parks will be bringing in, I've been told actually they're bringing in I'll put a question mark over that. I hope they're bringing in somebody to actually, given that there was a pre-report on fire risk, to actually say, look at it now, but it absolutely looked like that. And the other thing is, like, when you see the areas that the fire has gone through, there was just gorse, there's nothing there, it was bare ground, as you can see from those photos, whereas in quite a lot of our place, there are flaxes and other things that'll probably sprout away, hopefully. So I think it's not only it goes slower, but also you've got something left there to regenerate.
Can I just ask also, in your experience, the unique situation along that coastline, quite elevated and open to the sea, the gorse seems to be permanently stunted. In other words, in more sheltered environments, the gorse grows up and then other stuff grows underneath it. But your gorse seems to be locked into a kind of a permanent teenage. And
That's right. It's like a hedge almost. It's kind of knotted together. But actually, when I started working on some of that area recently, over Christmas, before I did my back in, when I parted and started to get down to the bottom, there was a lot of climbing asparagus in there. So it's actually, as I said, acting as a nursery crop for climbing asparagus.
And nothing else.
so it does need intervention.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So
Thank you.
just, I guess, members of the committee and Peter and Sandra, Dean is emailing our staff as we speak. So we will not only get back to you with a response, but to the committee, because this is obviously of high importance and high profile. So thank you both.
Madam Chair and committee members.
I'm happy to move that we thank
Second.
Sandra and Peter, seconded councillor Cooper. I'll put that, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, and it's carried with warmth and respect. Thank you. Now we've got local board input from Lamonga, Lydia Sosine from Mangere o Tahuhu. Now, I'm just checking that I've got this the right way around, and then we've got Lotu, Fully and Angela Dalton, and David Collins from Howick. This is all around the swimming pool issue.